currency. And I've gone to a few of the websites. Some of the companies are big, some are small. And then it's not even really clear what the investments are. They say just call them. Have you noticed this big uptick? And does this tie into George Soros and his Bretton Woods 2 hyping up that America's bad, that capitalism failed? We need the very bankers that did this to us to now take over everything. What's going on?
Well, all I've heard is that the ads exist, and I don't know anybody that's called. And so I don't actually know what they're up to, and whether it has any connection to Soros and his meeting and this new currency that they'd like to put together. I don't know. I would have to look into it.
Yeah, I've got to do some more looking as well. I want to go to the phone calls now, but before I do that, Bob, I've been asking the questions. Are there any other points or issues that you think are important that people should be made aware of?
Well, I think the situation in Libya becomes clearer. You've got the 4 aquifers under the country. You've got a good source of oil. You have a independent central bank that just happens to have 143.8 tons of gold in it. And you have, as you pointed out over and over, Al-Qaeda manning the guns for the rebels. The rebel leader was living for the last 20 years in Virginia and works for the CIA. And one of the things that I think is pertinent here that Paul Craig Roberts talked about, which I didn't address, is the cutoff of oil with China. And it is significant, and I wish I had thought of it, but I didn't. And I think that is an important aspect because, as Paul Craig Roberts explains, that this is an important event. And he also brings in the fact that Russia is being surrounded by NATO. And I think it's significant if we're going to have a third world war. And also he brings out the fact that AFRICOM was put together by France as well as the United States, and Mr. Gaddafi refused to join it. So there's several reasons why the U.S. and others want to get rid of Mr. Gaddafi.
But now we see the head general, U.S. general over the operation. We all know that the U.S. is really running the NATO operation, even though they claim NATO's in command, saying, yes, we'll probably have to invade. And we see the UN saying, well, we may invade, but that'll only be an advisory force. Well, there have been U.S. and British and special forces and CIA and MI6 in there before it happened. I mean, it's all on record. And more conservatives are finally waking up to the fact that al-Qaeda's globalist run. The fact that they admit al-Qaeda is the core of the rebels. The Wall Street Journal even admits that, but they spin it and say, well, maybe that's the good al-Qaeda. I mean, it's so in your face. It's so ridiculous, Bob.
It's obnoxious to a thinking person because anybody can see through what they're doing. And that's part of that arrogance. They don't care what we think anymore. They're going for the whole bag of marbles, and they know they have to. And they know what's going to happen if they lose. They're going to end up in court, in jail, and some of them might get hung. I mean, that's where this thing is headed. They've got to go for broke. There's no way back for them.
Well, I think that's in the final equation. The big issue is that the globalists are moving on every front. The French have gone into the Ivory Coast to back the rebels, slaughtering people. The globalists are trying to overthrow countries all over the world by backing rebels. I mean, the New World Order is now starting simultaneous wars all over the planet, not just the 4 they already had going, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, now Libya. You've got troops in over 100 countries, thousands of bases. And this is what the RAND Corporation 3 years ago wrote about. Paul Watson then wrote a story about it that got a lot of attention, where they said, to get out of this global depression and get our New World Order, we got to have something a lot bigger than Iraq and Afghanistan. We've got to have wars all over the place. War is the health of the state, as they say, and that's what's happening right now. Al in Ohio, you're on the air with Bob Chapman. Go ahead.
Well, I've been listening to you guys talk about the Constitution, and I'm just as big a fan of the Constitution as anyone else. We've got a problem, though. People don't seem to understand. Let me give you a Senate report, 93-549. This was done and submitted in November 1973. I'm going to read you just a small section of it, okay?
Are you about to tell me that treaties supersede the Congress? Because they don't, and the federal courts have ruled that.
No. I'm not going to tell you that.
Okay, well, go ahead, ma'am. What do you disagree with?
I disagree with the fact when they gave the President of the United States in 1933 the war and emergency powers, they never took it back.
Yeah, but I know we're in an emergency, but that's still illegitimate. That's a bit of legalese. We're reclaiming the republic. Just like in 1776, they said, we got red blood. We're not your slaves. We reclaim it. So much of this is not just their legalese or Bill Clinton saying depends on what the word is. It is an imperium. It is a dictatorship of the executive to have Obama doing this. And if the Congress has the will to impeach him, they can do it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't disagree with you, Alex. I do agree with you. But Congress, I don't even think would have to go that far. They can start by taking away his War and Emergency Powers Act, which is what he uses to do all of this stuff, making himself a dictator.
But he didn't say he was using that. He said for the credibility of the UN. They're not even mincing words.
But have you noticed that all of these guys have kept us either in a war or a state of national emergency? There have been no exceptions since 1933.
No. One time I was watching C-SPAN Live a decade ago or so, and the Sergeant of Arms marches in with the messenger of the president. I have a message. And then they used some grain crisis or whatever it was at the time to redeclare the emergency for the year. And we've had constitutional law scholars on that break this down, and now they've expanded it under the COG, FEMA system in the name of security. What we're saying is that itself is unconstitutional and illegitimate. And so if we begin to impeach Obama, our laws trump their confetti laws. Bob Chapman, do you agree or do you have comments on this?
No comments, and I agree with you, and I think that's the way to go on it. It gets right to the heart of the matter.
I mean, what about torture? What about saying they're allowed to kill U.S. citizens in assassinations? The War Powers Act doesn't give them that power. Even under wartime law, you're not allowed to assassinate citizens without trial. But I understand. Your name's Al, or did Al hand the phone to you from Ohio?
No, I'm Al. We could add that to what you guys are talking about, solutions. Get rid of his ability to do that, because he can do things without the permission of Congress. But, ma'am,
so much of... I appreciate your call, and I see where you're coming from. It's well taken. But, look, so much of life is simply saying, I'm not your slave. I mean, did black slaves 200 years ago that ran away from their slave masters, was that lawful? No, the law at the time said it was illegal. Forget that law. They're not slaves. And this is written into our law, that if somebody tries to pass a law that violates the Bill of Rights and Constitution, it's null and void. What is that, Marbury versus Madison and so many other rulings? I mean, if a cop comes to my door and says, come out here and mow my lawn, I don't have to. It's just common sense. So, yeah, Obama puts out a resolution. Obama says, the UN says, I don't care what they say. And again, it's that attitude of you're a fraud, you're a scam, you're a liar. The Federal Reserve is illegitimate. Just 10 years ago, 5 years ago, people said you could never beat the Federal Reserve. No one even knows they're private. Now in polls, over 80% know it's private, want to abolish it. The bankers, Brzezinski, give speeches saying we're in trouble. The people now see us. They're looking past our facades of politicians. Look. So much of a war is morale and knowing you're in the right and the moral high ground. We outnumber them 10,000 to 1. Let's kick their hind ends. Bob, comments?
Wow, you covered it very well. Absolutely. And bringing the word to the people is what's killing the enemy. And you cited Brzezinski, which we talked about numerous times before. They're in trouble. They've got to go for everything. There's no way out for them. And we've got them on the run.
That's right.
And it's because of programs in talk radio and what's on the Internet. We're reaching all over the world. I mean, I know you've done this before, but 3-4 times a month, I'm on foreign radio stations. They come to me, like they do to you, and say, would you be on and talk about such and such and so-and-so? We're reaching all over the world is the point.
That's right. And we have history, we have the Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence on our side. And if the globalists try to start shutting the web down or talk radio, that's not going to work. The genie's out of the bottle, and the globalists are fleeing forward. They're desperate. They're threatening and going in all directions because they're floundering. They can't hold gold and silver down. They're failing.
And that is the truth. They are failing. No matter how much they try, they can't keep it down anymore.
Let's go to David in Texas. David, you're on the air.
Hello, Alex.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, great show, by the way. I agree with everything you guys are talking about. This is kind of off topic, but it's something I thought that you might want to be aware of.
No, it's open phones. We're all over the map. Go ahead.
Okay. I follow YouTube, and I go around looking for guerrilla media, that's what I like to call it. It's basically, just people posting opinions and things. And I found something from a YouTube poster called Just Call Me Kit. Anyway, she posted a link to fedbizops.gov where they're looking for armed professional security officer services. If you want the solicitation number, I can give it to you.
No, I've got the solicitation numbers for internment center workers here in the U.S. It's in the Wall Street Journal. It's in the Houston Chronicle. So, yes, I've seen that. The government is arming every different agency they can. They are trying to hire tattletale squads, professionals to be tattletales. They're gearing up for a total criminal takeover because they know we're in a depression. They engineered it that way to get total power. I mean, how ridiculous is it, Bob, when they tell us that the recession's over when every indicator is inflation's kicking up and we're in a depression?
And employment really isn't improving. They use that U3 and knock it down from 10% to 8.8 over a 6-month period. But they could only get U6 down, which is the combination of the first 5, from 17.1 to 15.9. And therein lies the secret that in the unemployment numbers are over 22%. And there's no recovery when you have those kind of numbers. And how many people are being forced? 10 million or so to be working part-time, 34.3 hours a week.
Bob, let me ask you this.
So,
David, I appreciate your call. Interesting point. Send that to me. I'm sorry, Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so there is no recovery.
Well, even if you believe the baloney that this is a jobless recovery, another Orwellian term, the war isn't a war, it's a kinetic action, ground troops aren't ground troops, they're there now telling us that the economy's wonderful while oil prices explode. That affects every part of the economy. What are these single moms with 3 kids going to do? What are blue-collar workers going to do when gas is, in many areas of the country, $4 a gallon?
I guess they're not going to travel very much.
Well, it's going to kill every level of the economy, and that's going to be
certainly is.
And that's going to be money that people can't spend on clothes, housing, education, medicine. And I've seen financial experts on the news saying, well, if they spend the money one place, it's still as good as the other because that's profits for corporations. Those are offshore corporations. They use that in acquisition of big items, other companies. They're not spending the money here. That's the paradox, Bob. There's so much money the central banks have been dumping out in the world, but they're freezing it, getting to the people, and putting giant interest rates on it for those that can get it.
Well, they call it sterilization. And in U.S. corporations in the United States, in cash, right now, the figure is about $2 trillion. But there's another figure out there, transnational conglomerates, because they don't pay taxes in America for the money that they make outside the country. So that money is over in the Cayman Islands. And that's $2 trillion more dollars that they want to bring back, paying very, very little tax upon it. And so you're right. There's piles of money available, but they're not putting it to work in the economy.
And right-wing talk show host will love to scapegoat some limousine liberal or some welfare queen or some, out-of-control communist union. And sure, a lot of them are obnoxious. Even if all those people were sent to the moon, it would have no effect on what the banksters have done, and these neocon talk show hosts will not talk about the elephant in the room. They will not talk about the real issue that GE doesn't pay taxes, Google pays 2.4%, I'm paying 40+%, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, the tax bracket's way above 35. Get that straight. And now, I'm sure you saw the article, Bob, about the $4.5 million payment to somebody that ratted out their employer for making tax mistakes. The IRS spies.
Yeah, and that goes along with what you were talking about just a little while ago in relation to infiltrating businesses of all kinds and using people as spies. It's the same concept.
Land of the free, home of the brave has a hollow ring to it. Jack in Illinois, you're on the air with Bob Chapman.
Hi,